The decision I made was not sudden and it was not emotional. It came after months of reviewing documents, auditing numbers, and listening to experts who had nothing to gain by hiding the truth. What we discovered inside the French mining contract was unacceptable. The value taken from our soil did not match the value returned to our people. The imbalance was so large that continuing the agreement would have been an insult to every citizen of Burkina Faso. Foreign companies counted on the old system, a system where signatures were exchanged without transparency and where resources flowed outward while poverty remained. They believed those days would never end. They believed Burkina Faso would continue to accept deals that weakened our future. Canceling this billion-dollar agreement was not an act of hostility. It was an act of responsibility. Our minerals belong first to our nation, not to foreign boards of directors. If this decision shocks France, it is only because they expected Burkina Faso to remain silent. Silence is no longer part of our policy. The contract had been on my desk for weeks. I reviewed every page, every footnote, every financial clause that previous governments had ignored or accepted without questions. At first glance, it appeared like a standard mining agreement. But when my team and I began comparing the declared extraction volumes with export records from external monitoring agencies, the truth began to surface. The numbers did not match. The profits reported inside Burkina Faso were significantly lower than the profits declared abroad. Someone thought we would never notice. I called in independent auditors, not tied to any political interest, not influenced by foreign pressure. They reached the same conclusion. For years, the French operator extracted far more than what was reflected in the official reports. The wealth of our land was being carried out of the country while our people continued to struggle. I felt an obligation to confront what many leaders before me avoided. If we cannot defend the resources beneath our feet, then we have no right to speak about sovereignty. When I compared our share of the revenue to theirs, the imbalance was startling. Burkina Faso held the soil, bore the environmental risks, and provided the labor, yet the majority of the profit left our borders. This was not partnership. It was a system designed to appear legal while functioning in a way that drained our future. Some advised me to renegotiate quietly. Others warned that canceling the contract would provoke diplomatic tension. I listened, but my responsibility is not to comfort foreign actors. My responsibility is to protect the dignity of my people. There comes a point when injustice becomes so clear that silence becomes a form of betrayal. That point had arrived. I asked myself a question. If a billion-dollar agreement harms the nation more than it helps, then what purpose does it serve? The answer was simple. It serves someone, but not us. That realization guided my decision. No country that respects itself accepts exploitation disguised as cooperation. Burkina Faso deserves better, and I will not apologize for demanding fairness. Canceling the contract was not a threat. It was a correction. And the world needed to understand that Burkina Faso now chooses clarity over compromise. After the decision was made, I met with my economic council to analyze the broader implications. Canceling a billion-dollar mining contract is not a small administrative act. It reshapes alliances. It shifts expectations. It forces those who once benefited quietly to confront a new reality. I wanted to be sure that every step taken was based on truth, not emotion. We examined the long-term impact on our budget, our employment numbers, and our national development goals. What we found was clear. The benefits that were promised to Burkina Faso existed mostly on paper. The funds allocated for community development were minimal. Environmental protections were weak. Local reinvestment commitments were written in vague language that allowed endless loopholes. In simple terms, we were expected to give away our minerals and accept symbolic gestures in return. I have walked through mining towns. I have seen the land damaged by extraction and the communities left behind without clean water, proper roads, or sustainable income. Foreign companies come with polished presentations and promises of transformation, but when the dust settles, the people living near the mines carry the burden. This is why I refuse to let fiction guide policy. Real development requires respect, honesty, and measurable responsibility. When word began to spread that the contract was under review, foreign diplomats reached out with polite suggestions. They advised patience, they advised reconsideration, they spoke as if Burkina Faso was making a dangerous move. I listened quietly, but inside I felt no hesitation. A nation that is afraid to defend its resources will never build a stable future. Minerals are not just stones in the ground, they are leverage, they are power, they are the foundation of our economic independence. Some people misunderstand my intentions. They think the decision was meant to target France. That is not accurate. The decision targeted injustice. If any nation extracts wealth from Burkina Faso without fairness, I will take the same action, No country, no company, and no political relationship will be allowed to stand above our national interest. In the end, my choice was not about geopolitics, it was about dignity. A people who cannot benefit from their own land cannot speak of progress. I want a Burkina Faso where our children inherit prosperity, not depleted soil. This contract did not serve that vision, so it was removed. When the cancellation was officially announced, the reaction abroad was immediate. Some media outlets framed it as a sudden rupture. Others described it as a bold challenge to France. A few even suggested that Burkina Faso was acting recklessly. But none of them mentioned the deeper truth. They did not speak about the imbalance in revenue. They did not mention the violations of environmental commitments. They ignored the fact that a sovereign nation has every right to defend its wealth. Their narrative was shaped to protect old habits, not honesty. Inside the country, the response was different. Miners, students, and young entrepreneurs began sending messages of support. They understood that this decision was not about confrontation. It was about choosing a different economic model, one where resources benefit the nation first, one where the wealth of our soil is reinvested into healthcare, education, and industry, rather than disappearing into foreign accounts. I then instructed my ministers to prepare a transparent review of all major extractive contracts, regardless of the country involved. This was not a gesture, it was a structural reform. If we want to build a strong Burkina Faso, we must first understand exactly how our resources have been managed. There are agreements in this region that have not been questioned for decades. They were designed in a time when our states lacked leverage and lacked the confidence to negotiate on equal terms. That time has ended. During a private meeting, one advisor asked me if I feared diplomatic pressure. I answered simply, "Fear does not build nations, courage does." If we wait for the perfect political climate to protect our interests, we will wait forever. True leadership requires choosing the right path even when others prefer that you stay silent. As the days passed, international investors began asking new questions. They wanted to know if the Sahel was becoming unpredictable. I welcomed their concerns because they revealed an important reality. For many years, foreign companies assumed that contracts in Africa would never change. No matter how unfair, they believed we lacked the will to demand accountability. Now they are learning that Burkina Faso understands its value. A contract that harms our people is not stability, it is dependency disguised as cooperation. Ending such contracts does not create uncertainty, it creates a foundation for genuine partnership. This is the direction we have chosen. After the cancellation, I met with the ministry responsible for natural resources to outline the next steps. A decision of this scale cannot remain symbolic. It must produce structure, clarity, and opportunity for our people. I told them that Burkina Faso cannot simply reject unfair contracts. We must replace them with agreements that reflect our priorities and our vision for national development. Resources are not endless. Every ton extracted must build something meaningful inside this country. We began by mapping all major mining zones and reviewing their current output, potential capacity, and environmental condition. The findings were revealing. Many sites were producing far below what their geological surveys indicated. Others had been operating under outdated frameworks that gave foreign companies excessive control over pricing and export routes. These imbalances were created long before my administration, but correcting them is now our responsibility. I called for the creation of a resource management framework that gives the state full visibility into extraction volumes, export data, and revenue pathways. This is the only way to prevent future exploitation. Transparency does not weaken investment, it strengthens trust. Any nation or company afraid of transparency should not operate on African soil. As these internal reforms began, more messages arrived from abroad. Some expressed concern, others reminded me of political ties and historical alliances. A few attempted subtle pressure, implying that my decision could affect development programs or diplomatic cooperation. I responded with patience but with firmness. Burkina Faso is building a future where partnerships are based on fairness, not dependency. Anyone who understands that principle is welcome. Anyone who rejects it will find that we continue forward without them. What France felt was not hostility, it was surprise. For many years, their companies operated here under conditions that would never be accepted in their own country. They expected continuity, they expected quiet acceptance. Instead, they witnessed a government that values sovereignty more than convenience. During this process, I reminded my ministers of a simple truth. Natural resources are not a gift to the world, they are the inheritance of our people. If we allow them to be extracted without purpose, we betray generations that will come after us. Minerals must fund schools, hospitals, roads, and industries. They must elevate our citizens, not enrich distant shareholders. This is why the contract was cancelled, not to provoke France, but to protect Burkina Faso. As the review process expanded, I asked myself a broader question. Why did so many African nations accept these contracts for so long? The answer is not weakness, it is isolation. For decades, each country negotiated alone, believing it had no leverage. Foreign companies understood this and structured agreements accordingly. They knew that fragmented states could be persuaded, pressured, or misled with ease. But when nations stand together, the balance shifts. This is why regional unity matters. It gives us a voice that cannot be ignored. The Sahel Alliance strengthened my conviction. When Mali and Niger began their own contract evaluations, we exchanged insights, legal analyses, and accountability models. We realized that many of our mining agreements shared the same flaws. They were written in ways that favored extraction over development, secrecy over transparency, and dependency over progress. This discovery confirmed something important. Our struggle is not isolated. It is part of a wider pattern across the region. When I saw this pattern, my resolve deepened. I knew the cancellation was not only justified, it was necessary. If Burkina Faso continues to accept deals that benefit others more than its own citizens, then the promise of a sovereign future becomes impossible. Sovereignty is not defined by speeches or declarations. It is defined by how a nation controls its land, its skies, and its resources. International observers reacted predictably. Some accused me of nationalism. Others claimed I was pushing Burkina Faso toward isolation. They misunderstand the reality. We are not closing our doors. We are opening them on our terms. We welcome investment, but only investment that respects our laws and our dignity. A partnership is not a partnership if only one side grows while the other waits for promises that never arrive. Some officials abroad believed I cancelled the contract because of political ideology. They failed to understand that this was not about ideology, it was about arithmetic. The numbers did not lie. The imbalance was undeniable. No responsible leader would overlook such injustice and continue as if nothing happened. When I returned to the mining communities to speak with local leaders, their reaction said everything. They did not ask for foreign approval. They asked for fairness. They asked for opportunity. They asked for a future where their land is not a source of sorrow, but a source of pride. These voices strengthened my decision. Their hope is my responsibility. As discussions continued inside government, I called for a technical evaluation of what a fair mining agreement should look like for Burkina Faso. This was not an academic exercise. It was a blueprint for our future. I wanted numbers that reflected our reality. How much does extraction cost? How much value leaves the country? How much returns to our people? When these calculations were completed, the truth became impossible to ignore. For years, we accepted margins that no developed nation would tolerate. We allowed external actors to define the price of our own minerals. That era is ending. I instructed my team to prepare a model where Burkina Faso retains strategic control of production, processing, and export channels. Foreign partners can participate, but they cannot dominate. A nation that only exports raw materials will never be free. Real power comes from processing, refining, and manufacturing. That is where wealth is created. That is where jobs grow. That is where sovereignty becomes more than a slogan. While these reforms were being drafted, certain foreign analysts began questioning our competence. They assumed Burkina Faso was acting impulsively. They suggested we did not understand the consequences. Their comments revealed something deeper. Many still view African nations through outdated lenses. They fail to see the new generation rising across the Sahel. A generation educated, aware, connected, and unwilling to repeat the mistakes of the past. I do not govern for the comfort of foreign commentators. I govern for the children of this nation. As pressure increased, I chose not to respond publicly. There is no need to justify the defense of our own wealth. When a government refuses exploitation, it does not owe explanations, it owes results. So I focused on the next step, preparing a transparent, competitive process for future mining partnerships. One where every clause is clear, one where revenue distribution is fair, one where local communities benefit directly from the resources beneath their feet. I knew this transition would unsettle many outside our borders. But leadership is not measured by how others feel about your decisions. It is measured by the impact on your people. If a contract enriches outsiders more than citizens, it has no place in our future. Through this decision, Burkina Faso has affirmed a simple truth. We may be a young nation, but we will not be treated as a minor actor in our own land. Our minerals are our strength, and we will guard them with discipline. As the reform plans advanced, I began receiving reports from regional partners who were watching our decisions closely. Some expressed admiration, others expressed caution. A few admitted privately that they wished they had taken similar steps years ago but feared the political backlash. Their honesty confirmed something I have known